Joseph looked up from his tankard as the door swung open to admit a new patron to the tap house where he sat nursing a pale imitation of his homeland's drink. The barman had mistakenly referred to it as dwarven stout, but Joseph knew better as he forced himself to take another swig of the bitter draught. He wiped the excess from his beard and stared around the room. The door again opened as a man ducked into the room, followed by a sharp gust of early autumn wind. This caused the dwarven priest to shudder and pull his cloak closer around his shoulders. He reached into his pocket and pulled a small purple crystal from it. Justin stared at the swirling patterns that formed wherever his fingers touched its surface of the hard crystal. The mostly empty taproom grew quiet to Jostin's ears as he continued to stare, a faint glow emanating from the crystal's depths. He couldn't be sure if the swirling patterns pulsated with his own heartbeat, or if they were simply illusions of his own brain. A hand clapped down on his shoulder, causing the young dwarf to curse as he spilled the remnants of his beer all over the table. He turned to face his assailant and groaned as he recognized her face. "You didn't have to do that, you know," he grumbled as he tossed his dirty napkin across the slow-spreading pool of alcohol. "But that be the fun of it," Shirka said, sitting down beside her brother. "So, have we got word yet?" She lowered her voice as she spoke. Jostin grimaced. "Aye, we did. We're to move out in the morning and sail to the Twilight Glades. We're to find out what's happened to the rift there and report back." He held up the crystal in his hand. "Also, they be needing reports of how our crystals respond to being so close to the other side." Jostin glanced nervously around the taproom. The humans of this small port town were already suspicious of the band of dwarves who had suddenly come upon them. Jostin had already deflected so many questions directed at them to discern their purpose in the town. It would be good to finally leave it behind them, even if it meant traveling across the waves to the land of the elves. These nosy humans diving into business that had nothing to do with them. Jostin sighed and sat back. He needed to disabuse himself of that notion. His mission did concern the humans. It concerned all the noble races of Mantica. In fact, several legions of men, elves, ogres, salamanders, and all other manners of unlikely allies were sitting in his home of Caligdrum, several dozen leagues to the northeast, waiting for him to finish his mission and return with a report of what the blasted nightmares were doing. All of these races owed some sort of debt to Caligdrum, for they had been fighting a secret war unbeknownst to the rest of the world for generations now. They fought against the darkest of nights, that evil hour of midnight where dreams and nightmares could cross over into the world of the real. Jostin shuddered as his memory drifted to his long watches of the night where skittering wisps of fever dreams could swallow you whole if you were not vigilant. For hundreds of years their war had been a victorious, if terrifying one, but that had all changed with the recent events of the Abyss expanding its borders. Then came reports of a rift opening within the Twilight Glades. Since that time, the creatures of the dark had become more powerful, more tangible. Their attacks were more persistent, and little by little the dwarfs of Caligdrum were being pushed back. It had begun slowly at first, but then the attacks came more and more prominent, deep within their mountain hold where the sunlight never touched its walls. They had discerned in their centuries of fighting against the beasts that they were drawn to the crystals that formed in the depths of this particular mountain. Something about these natural crystals caused magic to linger within their hard surfaces. Enchantments easily clung to any artifact with one of these crystals embedded anywhere along its contours. But the nightmare creatures were also drawn to them, and when one ingested a crystal of any decent size, it immediately grew stronger. No, stronger wasn't the word. Palpable would suit it better. When a creature of the depth consumed the crystal, it was almost as if they stepped out from behind a veil, became more real, more tangible. This made them more ferocious and deadly in nature. There was something about these crystals that helped nightmares become real. As the forces of Caligdrum were pushed further back, they became desperate and called upon their allies for aid, stressing the urgency of their situation. Thousands had responded, and with their combined might, they were able to push the dark back into the depths of the mountain. But something had awoken and had summoned allies of its own. Savage orcs, goblins, and demons had answered the call, and now their allies were assaulted on both sides as creatures fought for control of the crystals. In desperation, Jocelyn and his small force were dispatched to the twilight glades to see if there was a connection between that rift and the monsters that were attacking the forces of Caladrum. They were to investigate, return, and report. But report on what? Another shudder took Jocelyn as he returned to the tap room. This time had nothing to do with the temperature. They left in the morning, but what horrors were waiting for them at the end of their journey? How many of his troops would return? He glanced at Shirka and gasped. Her face was twisted into a terrible mask. Her mouth was screwed up in a hideous smile that exposed rotten teeth, and her eyes had turned to a violent red that seemed to glow. "Jocelyn," her voice called out to the young dwarven priest, and he shook his head. When he looked again, Shirka's face was once again normal. "Are you okay?" she asked. Jocelyn blinked a few times, then stuffed his crystal back into his pocket. "I be fine," he lied. "Make sure you gets plenty of sleep tonight, and be ready for the morning." Jocelyn rose and walked towards the stairs that led to the rooms he had rented for his group. He paused and looked back at the tap room. His heart still hammered in his chest. Did the room seem to be darker now? He couldn't tell. He tried to take some deeper breaths to slow his heart, but it didn't help at all. He knew he wasn't going to sleep well that night. Not with the demons hanging over him like this.